Hello and welcome to Financial Secrets Revealed Season 2, where we are lifting the lid on financial abuse. Today, I'd like to welcome to the show Robert Persichitte, and he is based in the beautiful state of America, Colorado. Welcome, Robert.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Now, I notice you have taken your cardigan off today. You're an auditor by day. I've heard in the past, but you've got a bit casual for us, so thank you for
Yeah.
that. Now, you do have this accounting and consulting background, and you've recently become quite entrepreneurial, gone out on your own, started a company called De-Lagifi Financial, where you help people avoid and recover from scams, particularly financial scams.
hmm
That's a fascinating, I suppose, new job, not the sort of thing you leave high school and go, this is what I want to do. So, can you tell us how that came about?
yeah. So really, I'm the type of person who just says yes to everything, and so my career path followed that same trajectory. One of my very first jobs was working for the courts in trying to recover assets, trying to find assets, and that kind of dovetailed into some other skills, working with taxes, doing the audit work, doing other types of compliance audit. And really, it's the same type of accounting. I like to tell people that I'm an accountant in my soul. And it
The numbers
doesn't
go.
matter which side you're from. There you go.
So you had worked previously in the judicial branch, and this sounds quite new. I mean, we meet quite a number of people, doing this that are victims of scams, and it's by the time it's discovered, it's usually tough luck, too bad, nothing left, it's all gone. Whereas where you were working in the judicial branch, you were actively hunting the assets that people had been defrauded of to help make good, which sounds like every judicial branch should have this. So, can you tell us how all that came about and how you were involved in that?
Yeah. I had a lot of lucky timing. So the new rules came out just about the same time I was getting out of college looking for those types of jobs. And Colorado specifically has Colorado specifically has a very victim focused mindset where they are trying to restore that victim. They're trying to make good on things. And the laws and the statutes are built that way. So what a lot of perpetrators didn't know, because it was a fairly new law at the time, is if you did commit a financial crime, your terms of probation can be whatever the judge assigned to you, or up to 30 years until you've paid the money back. So
Wow.
that was an unpleasant surprise for a lot of the criminals to know that we are going to be breathing down your neck for a very long time until we get this money back.
Wow. Can you give us an example of some of the cases you sat in or oversaw? Were they partner financial abuse? Were they elder abuse? All of the above?
Most of the cases that I saw had probably a family element to it, a caregiver element to it, where somebody's maybe taking advantage of an elderly person who can't manage their own finances, or trying to hide some assets from siblings, trying to really get that inheritance, get their hands on that inheritance. That was a very common case. But the cases really ranged from people who were working at organizations, defrauding the organizations, people who owned very large organizations, multi-million dollar organizations that were committing fraud. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite, or I shouldn't say favorite, I didn't like working in the case, but one
Stand
of the
out.
most interesting cases, somebody who had stolen over $300,000 from her employer, who was a adult entertainment provider. Um, Very interesting case from all parties involved, but all of them had one thing in common. They had been convicted of a crime, so they had their day in court. They sat in front of a jury. They've been proven beyond a reasonable doubt to be guilty, and now we're going in to get that money back.
Okay. So, all these cases that you're doing, I know you talked there was about adult protective services being involved in some of the elder abuse cases, and where some of the victims actually still, even after you were trying to do restitution, still didn't want the perpetrators of the crime getting into trouble, although they'd been convicted. And we know there's so much emotion involved when it comes to, especially to elder abuse crimes, because it's often someone they love or trust, and that, you know, there's some shame and embarrassment. But to actually be actively still protecting the perpetrator, you've seen that as well. So how does that unfold with those cases?
Usually we first learn about it before I even get involved during the defense trial. And the reason being, their defense attorney will call victims of the scam as a witness to say, no, I wasn't scammed. I really like this guy. I don't want them to go to jail. And in my opinion, I'm not an attorney by any stretch, but I think that they might want to look to other cases and see how that goes, because almost always on cross-examination, they go and ask the details of it. Well, did they take your money? Did they give it back? Did they lie to you? Yes, yes, yes. But I'm not a victim of fraud. I really like old Charlie. There's one person in particular. I call him Charlie. That's not his real name. I changed the names to protect the guilty and the innocent. But everybody loved Charlie, and he was sincerely very, very likable. I'm kind of in this adversarial position with him, and still the guy was so darn likable, so enjoyable, and he had a lot of victims. I would estimate probably about 70 victims. A lot of them would send the money back. We'd recover funds a little piece at a time, send it off to them, and they'd to call us back and say, we don't want Charlie's money, put it back in.
What was Charlie's crime? What was his scam that he was defrauding them all with?
Yeah, really, really interesting scam. If you've ever seen the movie The Producers, same scam, but instead of a musical, it was an oil well. Basically, you're opening a business that you know is going to fail so you can get the investors' money. Once you get the investors' money, you pay yourself a very big salary, allow the business to fail, and keep the leftover profits. Basically, you're overselling the business there. And he did that with oil wells. So basically he said, hey, give me, I think there's a place where there's oil up in the mountains. Give me $10,000. I'll explore it. We'll see if there's oil, and then we'll be rich together. And then he'd do that same sales pitch to 30 other people. He'd spend $10,000 and then go back to him and say, well, sorry, there wasn't oil here. We didn't find anything. Thanks for the $10,000, but we both lost out on this, and we'll call it a day, not knowing that he got way more than his original expenses. It's kind of a complicated crime when you think about it. There's a lot of steps involved, and very difficult to detect. And I think that's maybe a component with his victims where, hey, he said he was going to look for oil. He looked for oil. There wasn't oil there. But what the state was able to prove, you knew there was no oil there. He knew there was no oil there. He had no intention of ever paying these investors back their money. But, given the benefit of the doubt, somebody who's been tricked, they don't want to see that they've been tricked. It's really hard to admit it, especially when you really like the guy that was.
Well, I suppose you do often have to be quite a charismatic person to pull it off, don't you? So you have to have some charm of manner anyway to be able to run with the scam. And often these people become serial con men, don't they? So hopefully these laws that are in Colorado now will spread to other places where you have to pay that back. So that would be a deterrent, I'm thinking, for some of the fraudsters.
Yeah. And it certainly is a deterrent, especially if they think they're going to be able to keep it. And to your point, some of them are committing new scams. And it wasn't uncommon for us to see somebody paying restitution with the proceeds of another scam. Now, once you're on probation, we get to see everything. We see
Yeah.
your bank accounts, and we see it's one of the terms of probation, and it's kind of a choice between I'm going to surrender some freedoms or I'm going to go to jail. So they say, yeah, you know what? I to stay out of jail, you could see my bank accounts, you could see my credit cards. I'll make these meetings, and you can search me without a warrant. A lot of extra steps to get out of jail, but that extra vision allows us to know, hey, you're clearly defrauding, and it was a very similar scam, and we just look at the bank account and say, well, how's this money coming in? Where are you getting this money from? Why are people paying you? And yeah,
You
that
hadn't.
that happened. That happened
Yeah.
once.
It was an
Yeah,
oil well that never existed.
they didn't learn their lesson, but they kind of told us, hey, back off. I'm paying restitution. You shouldn't care where it comes from. Like, no, because you're going to be right back here. I'm going to have more restitution to collect.
Wow. So the scams all have to be repaid. How does it work in a family situation? So, say, between a husband and wife, if a husband's been hiding assets or not allowing his wife enough money, they divorce, it all falls apart. How does that work in the judicial system with restoration?
That one becomes very tricky, and there's different types of cases. So there's civil and criminal cases. We only collected on the criminal cases. So we only collected money that was directly connected with a crime. A lot of times, the people are already not talking. They're already, if they're family members, if they know each other, they're already separated. And this person was charged with criminal fraud to be working with me. That was the hurdle back then. Um, it, a lot of times it went just directly to those victims, just like any other fraud case. Very, very rarely would they want to talk to or even see that other person. So I think the more stark example of that is if there is a family unit where there's brothers and sisters, one sibling is taking advantage of mom and then has to pay it back to him. It's really destructive to the family. And most of the time, they want nothing to do with nothing. And um, sometimes to the point where they won't come in to get a restitution check. They just want it. They just want it behind them.
Yeah. So obviously, elder abuse cases are on the rise. You've mentioned the inheritance impatience already, where one sibling's like, "Oh well, I'm going to get it one day. I might as well get it now and get more."
Mm-hmm.
Um, Pretty awful for families to deal with because often there is nothing left, for the rest of the family once that's happened. Um,
Well, and beyond that too, I think that kind of plays into the justification of, oh, it's just my brothers and sisters. I saw a lot of justifications of, well, I'm taking care of mom. I'm spending the time. She's living with me, so I might as well drain all of her bank accounts because I'm the one. I
yeah,
deserve it. And really, the problem is not necessarily that the siblings don't have their money. The problem is mom needs to go into memory care, or she needs a surgery. She needs some type of expensive thing, and there's nothing there to pay for it. Well, she thought she had it. A lot of times, too, the government benefits out here might end up getting involved and saying, hey, you don't qualify for state assistance because you had $1 million in the bank a year ago. What happened to all of that? And that's where things tend to get really nasty, pretty much all around for all parties involved: the victim, the criminal, the person who was abused, the elderly person who was
so
abused.
who has to decide that what has happened here is a crime? Do the siblings have to go to the police and say, look, my brother has defrauded my mother or father. They need to look into it. And I'm guessing that's the same between a husband and wife. She has to say, look, he has
Yep.
actually defrauded me. Is that a difficult thing to do in Colorado?
For elder abuse, it is not, and it's because we have specific departments and specific procedures set up to prevent elder abuse. So if you're showing that somebody's taking advantage, someone who can not take care of themselves. We take it very seriously, and we have the resources to go after that person. In a case where it's a husband and wife, and maybe they're disagreeing, so let's say they got a divorce and the accounts got drained, you'd probably need to go to law enforcement with a pretty compelling case. You'd probably have to show them the evidence, gather a lot of the evidence yourself, and say, hey, look, see this, this person clearly did the crime. Can you help me out here? But most of the time, those folks are going to start with a civil case anyway, because it's just a lot easier. It's a much lower burden of proof to prove it in a civil case. The advantage of the criminal case is, one, you have investigators, you have people like me going to collect it, and potentially the person's facing jail time. So they have a very strong incentive to cooperate, but it's also a very high burden of proof. It's hard to prove that.
So is Colorado a very forward state in America with this law, or is it very standard that there's elder abuse and fraud laws and restitution laws throughout most of the United States?
Colorado, I would say Colorado was very progressive 10 years ago, and a lot of other states have caught up by now. Colorado is one of the first states. Another program that I worked on was the conservatorship audits. And you may have heard of conservatorship recently in the news with Britney Spears.
Highlighted that case, one of the standout, pin-up girls for conservatorship, isn't she? So
yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm glad it brought a lot of attention to this. But Colorado has specifically a unit that only audits and reviews conservatorships, and having the specific elder abuse, the specific elder abuse, and then other things that we've really been kind of cutting edge on were things like restorative justice panels, where victims get to face the criminals who wronged them in a very structured setting, in a way that's beneficial for both the criminal and the victim.
So not just the reading of a victim impact statement of you did this to me, you ratbag, just more detail, I'm guessing.
Yeah, and really it's a conversation. And the joke that I always like to tell about it is a lot of these people think fraud is a victimless crime, just like punching a guy in the dark. And just because you don't see the impact doesn't mean that the impact isn't there. And a lot of times it's very specific. And the restorative justice panels are very much designed, and guardrails are put in place to see what's the impact on the victim. And certain judicial districts, including Boulder, do that not just for economic crimes, but for violent crimes, for other types of crimes as well. It can be very helpful, very cathartic.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just duck back to Brittany for a moment? Is the California law on conservatorship very different to the Colorado law in that, would it have been audited more? Brittany's obviously, this was over her father and what he was making her do, forcing her to do shows she didn't want to, allegedly. Would that have been audited or looked at differently in your state compared to California?
It's tough to say because I don't know the ins and outs in California specifically, and I don't know what exactly they have put up there. I will say, having worked in that department, that was one of my later jobs as an auditor. Having worked in that department as well, it's very tough. It's very, very tough to determine what's a real complaint and what is someone who just doesn't like the process or doesn't like the system, because I don't think anyone wants to be on a conservatorship, whether they actually should be on a conservatorship or not. The court telling you have to give up control of your money and assets is very frustrating, even for people who have a very defined objective impairment where they can't do that. And that's really who the system is designed for, of people who really can't manage for themselves, young children, people with severe mental disabilities, um, and nobody likes it. Nobody
Well, yeah,
is
it's a loss of
excited to be on a
control,
conservatorship.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Absolutely. So nobody likes to have, loss of control. So we don't have conservatorship in Australia. I think we'd call it guardianship, which is quite similar. Or you can nominate before you lose power, which is our power of attorney system, which I believe most countries have quite a similar thing. But yeah, to be
we do too.
told
Yeah,
you don't have capacity and have to hand it over, and again, you'd hope that the family member is acting in your best interests, and that we all hope for that. So one of the things here we say to help protect yourself with your powers of attorney is that it's not just given to one person, that it has to be done jointly between two people to help reduce the risk. Is that possible with a conservatorship, or the court just decides on your behalf how it works?
the court decides on your behalf. In Colorado, this is going to differ greatly by state. You have a conservator and a guardian, and they're different people. So the guardian is the one who's in charge of medical decisions, what your work might look like, what capacity you may or may not have to
Like
be
a
able to do
physical
work.
welfare?
Yeah, physical welfare, that's a really good way to put it. Where the conservator is responsible for financial welfare.
Right.
And they are responsible for paying the bills, signing things off. Now, having that degree of separation, the intent is to add that extra level of protection there. Now, just because they're two different job titles doesn't mean that they're always different people. Sometimes there's not an alternative, and the court will name the guardian and the conservator as the same person, like in Britney Spears' case there. But at least in Colorado, you don't have to be the same person. They can be different people. I think, I'm certainly not a lawyer, so I don't want to give that impression, but having those documents in place and having communicated what you want to your family, having communicated not just generally but specifically as well, of saying, I want this person to be in charge, but if this happens, don't sell the house. If this happens, do this. Having that open line of communication makes it a lot easier. And a lot of the clients that I work with think, oh, my kids will take care of it, or the family will take care of it. They'll figure it out. And that might be true, that your family's very good at figuring things out. Emotions are likely going to be high because you're not in a good situation. There might be differences of opinion of what happens, and everything gets escalated so much higher when money's involved. And the feelings get escalated, the stakes get escalated, and people, I've seen it personally, people make huge decisions that may cut a family member out of their life permanently over really just a lack of communication, a lack of not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's so important, is it, the communication and making sure you understand each other's wishes, having that family, powwow or meeting before things go badly is such a good idea. But who wants to sit down and go, right, when I'm not here, this is what I want to happen. Or if I'm not compass, these are my wishes. It's just something that it's really hard, really confronting. And, even the kids are sitting there going, oh, mum, don't be ridiculous. We'll take care of you. So it is such a hard thing to have that open line of communication about. I've also heard that once you're under a conservatorship in the States, it's a very, very difficult thing to have removed, because basically the courts have said you don't have capacity. And whether you're 16, 19 or 90, you've got to fight pretty darn hard to prove, actually, I do and I want it removed.
Yeah. I'd say that's more true for adults, because you then have to demonstrate, well, what changed? You didn't have capacity. How do you have capacity now? What is different about it? With children, it's a bit easier. And in Colorado, in fact, I believe the age is still 21. At 21, you automatically roll off unless they have to petition to extend the conservatorship.
So you have
But
a child who's intellectually impaired. You need to go and
you go through
reapply.
the process. Yep, you
Okay.
reapply, and there's a person called a visitor who will sit down, talk through things, um, describe to the court why they believe this person is impaired. Their official job title is visitor, but it's usually some type of medical professional.
Right. To help with that. So now that you're self-employed, what's a day in the life of Robert look like with De-Lagify? How do people find you, come to you? What sort of cases are you looking at day by day?
So ideally, I'm talking to people before there's a scam. And there are a lot of really bad investments out there that are on the rise, and a lot of kind of tricks that people are using to get around some of the regulations. And they're becoming more and more popular here in the States. What was that?
Like our mate Charlie with his oil well.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, the only reason Charlie got caught is because he didn't register. If he registered, he'd probably still be ripping people off today.
So what are the
So,
Charlies you're dealing with, Robert?
so a lot of what I'm dealing with is really, I boil it down to just one thing: get rich quick schemes.
Okay.
Of give me 10,000, give me 20,000, and I'm going to promise you a huge return. That is almost always a scam. And a lot of cases, my job is really easy. Where people get these offers, they come to me and say, hey, is this a scam? How will this affect my finances? How will this affect my life overall? And
Oh wow, that's
usually it's
fantastic.
very
It's
easy
an
of
option.
it's a
You can,
scam.
yeah. Well, so your role, I suppose, almost financial counselor advising, is this real? Is it registered? You do a bit of due diligence on their behalf. Is that this sounds a
Mm-hmm.
bit too good to be true. I'd really love to do it, but I'll just run it by a third party. So that's where you come
Yeah.
in.
And I'll tell you one example specifically. Um, some folks were interested in doing a real estate deal. And I saw the company, and on paper, it looked fine. It looked like there wasn't much there, and the basic deal is you give them you give them a house, you give them a property, they're going to manage it for you, and then give you some money back. And when you're done, you sell your house. If you want to get the cash back, you can sell your house and you get the money for it. That's what it said. That's what their marketing materials said. And my first thought is, seems pretty reasonable. Let me take a look at the contract. And they were pretty reluctant to show me the contract, which was my
So this
first red
was
flag.
the people who were investing, or the
The,
company.
the company,
Right. Okay.
the
Yeah.
people,
That's
the
correct.
solicitors, the people trying to get the
Yep.
investment. And
Okay.
I say, hey, I'm a CPA. I am just doing some due diligence for my client here. Um, give me some information. Give me the financials. Give me your contract your standard contract. And I got a lot of, oh, well, we don't have a contract for this property. I'm like, oh, give me your standard contract. Show me your last contract. Blank out the names. Show me the last one that you issued. And go through it and find that there's a lot of real sneaky things in there. And off the bat, they get 3% of the house. Then they get 1% per year for the privilege of working for them. And then they get another percent per year for the cost of maintaining the house. And then they get a blank check for advertising. Of any advertising or client acquisition, anything they paid to get you as a client or future clients, they can bill to you directly. And adding it all up, looking at some of the typical clients, what we're looking at is about 12% in fees plus some other problems that were there. Right away, 12% of a house is a big number, very big number.
Yeah.
And so I go and I talk to them. I get the clients and the solicitors together, and I say, hey, I looked through the contract. Can you explain this to me? It's 12% in fees. Your marketing is only showing this 3% plus 1 year annual. They say, yep, that's right. It is only 3% up front and 1 year annually. I say, but your contract says 12%. And they say, well, those aren't fees, those are expenses. I say, well, who pays the expenses? The client. Okay, well, let's just use that interchangeably. So it's really having kind of the vocabulary, knowing how these tricks work. I wouldn't call that one a fraud. They were transparent about it. It did say they were certainly misleading. They were certainly not a company that I would advise anybody work with, but they didn't really break any laws. They didn't do anything illegal. And if you tried to sue them, the attorneys would probably say, well, why didn't you read the terrible contract that you signed?
Which
and
most mum and dad Joe Blogs clients are clueless about. They're not written in plain English. They're hard to get through. Like you said, you need somebody, as that sounding board to be able to help you out. So, I mean, the client may still decide to go ahead there knowing all that, but they've at least had that conversation with you going, you know what, we're okay with the 12.5%, or you know what, you guys are rat bags and we don't want to be part of it. So, great option to have it. Because you were a victim of fraud or abuse or misleading and deceptive conduct, which actually can be a crime in Australia. If what you've advertised and what your contract states are different, you can be in a world of pain as a company.
Oh, sure.
Absolutely. So
I here in America, you can sue anyone for any reason.
Yeah,
doesn't mean you're going to win. It doesn't mean you're going to win. And
I think you're the winners in the litigation stakes. That's for sure.
Right. I looking this one, I did have to work with some outside counsel looking at it. Here in the States, they probably would not have had any recourse. It probably would have been falling back on, you should have read the fine print.
So you basically, I think I've got a new job title for you, Robert. I think you're the Financial Abuse Prevention Unit.
There you go.
Or the Fraud Prevention Unit. So I love that you've come up with this role and, wish it was available in so many more places. And I suppose especially down to the hubby wife where it, is so much more difficult to see, and the elder abuse cases, it's just awful when it's emotional. Like if it's something as easy as, do I invest in this investment or not? It's much easier to go, you know what, not handing my house over, fine. Yeah, when it's fighting with the siblings, it does make it so much harder, doesn't it? Have you got any advice? I mean, you've seen a lot of people who've been victims of fraud and scams and financial abuse. Any tips for what if you think you may be a victim? Because not everyone knows straight away. It can be creeping. Do you have any advice for people who go, this isn't feeling right, what can I do?
Yeah. So the first thing that makes it so hard to snap out of it is just naturally, as humans, as people, we don't want to believe that we were wrong. We don't want to believe that we made a mistake. And so the first step is really to take a dose of humility and try to remove your ego from the situation. Now, one of the tricks that I really like about that is don't think of it in terms of yourself. Think of it in terms of a good friend, and think specifically. Think of, who's your best friend? Who are you seeing on the weekends? And say, Johnny, my best friend, if Johnny came to me and said that he was doing this and somebody did this to him, how would I feel about that? How would I feel if somebody made these promises with nothing to back it up? And it's very, very easy to fall for a slick talker. It's very easy to fall for, especially if they have like charts or graphs and you don't understand them. It's very easy. Forgive yourself first. And remember that you may have made a mistake, but it's an easy mistake to make. Thousands of people make this mistake. And specifically, you didn't do anything wrong. You made a mistake. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't hurt anybody. You trying to unwind this and fix this problem is not a bad thing that you're doing to the scammer. You're not hurting the scammer. They hurt themselves, and you are trying to get back to normal. You're trying to get out of that scam and have it be a clean break. So once you do that, once you remove those emotions, and that's easier said than done, but
Absolutely. Yeah.
once you can think about it that way, everything becomes so much clearer. And I'll tell you, from a victim's standpoint, when you're in the middle of the scam, you do a lot of mental gymnastics to try to justify it and try to make it look like you were not the victim. And um, uh, as somebody personally who has gone through this, as somebody who has experienced it firsthand, I started with the one assumption of, hey, this person wouldn't do this to me. This person that I know, that I care about, that I like, they wouldn't do this to me because I wouldn't do this to them.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hurt them in this way. They wouldn't hurt me in this way. And then the evidence starts coming in of, hey, this person's getting investigated by the police. No, it must be that the police got something wrong. Hey, the bank stopped the payments here. No, the banks have it out for this person that I love. Hey, somebody's asking me to testify at a trial. No, no, no. It must be a big scam. And you start ignoring all this evidence that's coming in, even very clear evidence of all my money is gone. No, no, it can't be a scam. I love this person. I care about this person. I trust this person. It can't be a scam because I trust this person. And let me tell you, if you didn't trust the person, the scam wouldn't work. You have to trust the person. That trust has to be there, and it's not your fault. It's really not. It just comes down to try to see it from that and don't ignore the evidence. And once I was able, from my personal experience, once I was able to do that, once I was able to detach myself and say, well, what would I tell somebody else? It was like a light bulb went off. And all of a sudden, all of this other evidence that I was purposely ignoring immediately flooded. And I was hitting myself and saying, oh my gosh, it is so obvious. You've been scammed. You it happened. It happened.
Yep. And like you said, don't feel that you're alone. It does happen to thousands of people. And super educated, savvy, financially amazing people can still get done. The scams are getting slicker and savvier and smarter every day. I mean, these people are professionals at what they do to part you from your money, even if they are your friends or family or loved ones. So I love your advice there, Robert, to get out of your own way because, like you said, I mean, I'm always looking for the good. I'm like, oh, but I wouldn't do that. Why would you do that to me? Like, I don't get it. So yeah, that resonates very closely for me. So thank you so much for your insights and your advice. Any parting words?
Yeah, I mean, I think tying it all together, always get a second opinion. And especially when something seems too good to be true, get a second opinion. That doesn't have to be a professional. You can just go to somebody that you trust, somebody who thinks about these things. And if you're having a hard time explaining it, that probably means you don't understand it as well as you should. So maybe go back, learn a little bit more. Just because something's hard to explain doesn't mean it's a bad investment. But learn enough about it that you can explain it. Explain, how does this person make money? Are they making money from their investors, or are they making money from something that is profitable that I can be a part of? Answer that question. Answer that question very definitively, especially when things seem too good to be true.
Yep. Good advice. Very good advice. Well, thank you, Robert, so much for joining the Financial Secrets Revealed podcast. I'll make sure we have all your details in the show notes so people can get in touch with you at De-Lagifi if they'd love to learn more. And again, thanks for your insights. Really appreciate it.
Great. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.